Today we're looking at Faber Castell's Burnt Orange. Hi, I'm Adam and I'm an ink guy. There's timestamps down below so that you can skip around, but if you got the time, I would appreciate if you check out the entire video. Also, if you're interested, you can check me out over on Instagram, and if you're new here and like fountain pen inks, I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this cross Bailey with a medium nib to write for a day and to take the notes for this video. I always standardize some of my writing samples by using Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper, although I do use more papers and some of those will be seen later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It has a beautiful shading that's going on here. Look at the word graph, look at orange. Entirely different tones. It's got a kind of ombre effect going on in its shading, and it's subtle throughout constantly, but it's very much there. It's really gorgeous. The extra fine starts as a base tone significantly lighter than the stub. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and a ton of gorgeous shading. Like, look at the word brown, how it works its way from dark all the way down to a nice light tone. Fox starts light and gets dark. Quick starts dark on the left side of the Q, lighter on the right side of the Q. Mid-tone into the U, lighter all the way to the K where it gets much darker. Gorgeous. And 10 seconds to dry. Now, medium is the same tones that we're getting with the extra fine. Medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and a ton. The shading shows even better on the medium. Just look at the Q in quick. The bottom and left of the down loop of that Q, nice and dark. Nice and light into the rest of the word, very dark on the K. The B in brown starts with that yellowish to orange, and then it gets dark in the loop of the B. It's light at the top. It goes to a lighter at the R, very dark at the O, lighter at the W, very dark at the N. Gorgeous amounts of shading with this particular ink, and 15 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both show us plenty of color variation, and we got tons. Tomoe River. No bleeding, less ghosting than we're used to with Tomoe River. The stub has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no real shading. That gets lost on Tomoe River a bunch of times just because the ink is able to just sit on top, level out as it dries. The extra fine, much lighter than the stub, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, and a lot of shading. I normally don't see a ton of shading go on Tomoe River. Here it does happen. Again, you have to look far left to far right in words. You have to really look through them because it shades up and down so gently and beautifully, like the word brown, very dark, working its way lighter. Gorgeous. 15 seconds to dry. The medium, much lighter base tone than we get with the extra fine. No feather, spread, halo sheen, and the shading is incredible. Look at the word quick, where you get this orange, a dark orange to a very light orange to very dark. Just amazing. Brown starts light, gets dark, gets light, gets dark again. 21 seconds to dry. Feels very worth it. Excuse me, I need some water. Yeah, my throat was definitely kind of scratchy there. 21 seconds to dry. Very worth it. The scrubby for both shows plenty of color variation, and we get tons. Gorgeous. Rhodia paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it still offers plenty of good shading, just not as good as what we saw before. This is mostly the dark tones with only hints of areas of the lighter tones, like the top of the C, the top of the F, little areas with some lighter tones. The Extra Fine's base tone is significantly lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, gorgeous shading, all the way through the writing. Look at the F in Fox. Light at the top, dark at the bottom, dark into O, very dark at the X. Nice. 11 seconds to dry. The medium, same tone as the Extra Fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, and the shading is even better again. This shade's great with broader pens. Look at Lazy. The bottom of the L is very dark, the top is nice and light. The A is light, the Z gets darker, the Y gets much darker and then lighter through the bottom loop. 16 seconds to dry. The Scrubby for both shows plenty of color variation, and we got plenty. I agree with Vita that we learn a lot when we do multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we can see here why there was such depth in the color in that first writing sample. We get this a very pink color at the bottom. Now there is a line across the bottom that makes me feel like it might want to stay around a little bit. It pushes up and we see more of a salmon color. And then this very bright yellow. This is 3 distinctly different colors mixed to make this beautiful burned orange. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. The only thing that stands out to me is that pink line across the bottom. It's much darker, much more into the filter paper, and there. I think the pink might be a holdout type color. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I'm immediately drawn to the G and the H that get blown out and blurry, and it would make me nervous in a note-taking situation because I'm very risk-averse. Now, water is lifting only the darkest tones. We're seeing a lot of the pink very much left behind. It doesn't feel like water is getting it all out of there. Now, pen flush, there was obviously a little bit of accident that caused it to sway off to the side, and you see all of those colors running away. But we see a lot of pink left behind. This is another one of those pens that I did not have issues cleaning it out of my pen. But if you had to use a 1/3 bleach solution, take note of the fact that it has not completely obliterated it off the page. There's still some of that pink left behind. Now, I don't think you need the 1/3 bleach. If you do, make sure you immediately flush your pen with water. I think given some time with pen flush, given a little bit of scrubby time, pen flush is going to be all that's needed to get this out of your pen. I test for viscosity or flow using a thing called a tilt test. I will link how I do that, the video of it, down below or up in the cards. I also then put it onto a standard distribution so it's more easily seen with all of the inks that I've tested. Now, for the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Graf von Faber Castell's Burned Orange has a viscosity of 1.6, making this a very, very wet ink. It's in the red. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples. And for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Graf von Faber Castell's Burnt Orange has an average dry time of 15 seconds. So despite it being so wet, it was in that red zone, it managed to come back up to normal in its dry times. Instead of finding inks that look like Graf von Faber Castell's Burned Orange, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. And being such a great orange here, I wanted a very nice turquoise. And I chose Colorverse Gravity Wave. The second writing sample is done on White Lines, Limon, and Canson Bristol paper. With these papers, we really put this ink to a very wide test here. This is White Lines paper. It's really not made for fountain pens. It performed very well. We really get no bleed through. We have no show through. You could use the back of this page. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shading. It's all the dark orange in there, although just to point out, the graph looks much darker than the orange part. But it's all the darkest versions of this ink. Now the extra fine is significantly lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and really good shading, even on this gray paper that's quite absorbent. Look at brown, starts much darker, gets lighter. I don't expect to generally see color variation on this paper, but the bottom of the Y is much lighter than the rest of the word. The beginning of the G is much lighter than the rest of dog, and only 3 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine. Medium has no feather spread, halo sheen, plenty of good shading throughout it, even on this paper. Look at the word dry. Light at the beginning of the D, gets very dark through, gets lighter into the Y. Beautiful. Lazy starts light, gets very dark, gets lighter at the end. 5 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows plenty of color variation, and we got it. Now this is Limone paper, which has generally not done well with fountain pens. It did not do well for bleed on the stub, but it did perfectly good with the medium and the extra fine. No real ghosting on either of those, only on the stub. On the stub, we have some small feathering that's occurring, especially through the word orange. No spread, halo sheen, no shade. The cream color is hiding some of the shading that can occur with the extra fine. The extra fine is a significantly lighter tone than the stub. It has no feather spread, halo sheen, and not a lot of shading. There's a couple darker spots, and that's about it. Like the L in lazy is much lighter than the bottom of the Y in lazy. But it's that thinner line and this cream tone that's making a lot of the shade disappear. 3 seconds to dry. Medium, quite a bit lighter than the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and a lot of really good shading. It's doing great here. Quick, starts nice and dark, gets to a mid-tone through the middle, gets darker at the I, lighter at the C, very dark at the K. Very nice. 4 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us plenty of color variation. We did get it in the medium, we didn't get it in the extra fine. And this is Bristol paper, Canson Bristol. I would be surprised to ever see bleeding or ghosting. We didn't. The 1.1 stub has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine has no feather spread, halo sheen. It has shading spots, which help that it's much lighter than the stub. Like in Quick, it starts dark, gets light, gets very dark. Brown starts very dark and works its way very light. Fox starts very light and gets very dark. 5 seconds to dry. This is a very absorbent paper. Medium is even lighter than the extra fine. Medium has no feather spread, halo sheen, and the shade is even better than it was with the extra fine. Looking at Quick, it starts light, but the bottom of the Q is dark, stays light throughout, gets very dark on the K. Fox starts a bit darker, gets lighter, gets darker again. Beautiful. 7 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both the extra fine and the medium shows plenty of color variation, and we got plenty of color variation. And that is all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of Faber Castell's Burnt Orange? This ink has pop on the page. It makes people take note of what you wrote. It draws your attention. I like orange inks, and I really like this ink. So what pen and nib will give you the best writing experience with this ink? Anything you want, just not a fine, dry pen. Fine dries are just not going to put enough ink down to make this really have the character it has. It loses something. I put out a new ink review every single day, so that if you're not already subscribed, I'm going to remind you, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching.